Imani Jones pressed her hand against her stomach as another sharp pain shot through her body. The parking lot of City General Emergency Hospital stretched before her, bright fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the wet pavement. Blood stained her bright red dress, the one she had worn to work that morning when everything still seemed normal. Now, sitting in her beat-up Honda Civic at 11 p.m., nothing felt normal anymore. Her hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. The pain was getting worse. At 4 months pregnant, she knew this wasn't right. This wasn't supposed to happen. The cramping, the bleeding, the fear that gripped her chest like a vice. She needed to text her best friend, Chloe. Chloe would know what to do. Chloe always knew what to do. Her vision blurred as she typed frantically into her phone. Emergency at hospital. Bleeding bad. Might lose the baby. So scared. Marcus already left me. Can't do this alone. Please come. She hit send and leaned back against the driver's seat, breathing hard. Another wave of pain made her double over. She needed to get inside. She needed help, but she also needed someone to be there for her. Someone who cared. The phone buzzed almost immediately. On my way. Which hospital? Stay calm. Relief flooded through her. At least Chloe was coming. At least she wouldn't face this alone. She typed back quickly. City General Emergency. Hurry, please. 5 minutes. Hold on. Imani pushed open her car door and stumbled toward the hospital entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and the bright white lights of the emergency room made her squint. The smell of disinfectant hit her nose as she approached the reception desk. A tired-looking nurse looked up. How can I help you? I'm pregnant, Imani said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm bleeding. Something's wrong. The nurse's expression changed immediately. How far along are you? 4 months. Okay, honey. We're going to take good care of you. Let's get you checked in. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of forms, medical questions, and being moved to a small examination room. The doctor, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Evans, explained they needed to run tests immediately. Is someone coming to be with you? Dr. Evans asked, as she prepared the ultrasound machine. Yes, my friend should be here any minute. But as the minutes ticked by, Chloe didn't appear. Imani's phone remained silent. Where was she? She had said 5 minutes, and it had been almost 30. The ultrasound screen flickered to life, and Dr. Evans moved the wand across Imani's belly. The black and white images meant nothing to Imani, but she watched the doctor's face carefully for any sign of what they revealed. Good news, Dr. Evans said finally. The baby looks fine. Strong heartbeat. But you're having some bleeding that we need to monitor closely. I want to keep you overnight for observation. Relief washed over Imani so powerfully that tears started flowing down her cheeks. The baby was okay. Her baby was okay. But where was Chloe? She picked up her phone again and scrolled through her messages. That's when she saw it, the name at the top of their text conversation. Her blood went cold. Julian Caldwell, not Chloe Davis. Julian Caldwell, her boss, the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, the billionaire who signed her paychecks and barely knew she existed beyond her role in the accounting department. She had texted her boss about her pregnancy emergency, her secret pregnancy that no one at work knew about. She had told him about Marcus leaving her, about being alone and scared, about potentially losing her baby. This was a disaster. Her phone buzzed with another message. Are you okay? I'm in the parking lot, but I don't see you. Imani stared at the message in horror. He was here. Julian Caldwell was actually here at the hospital looking for her. He had dropped everything and driven to City General Hospital at 11 p.m. because of her desperate text message. She had to fix this. She had to explain. She had to apologize for bothering him and tell him it was all a mistake. But as she started typing a response, another wave of pain hit her. Dr. Evans returned with a nurse. "We're moving you upstairs to a room," the doctor said. "You need complete bed rest, and we want to monitor you closely. This bleeding could indicate several different conditions, and we need to be careful." "But I need to," Imani started to protest, thinking of Julian waiting outside. "You need to rest," Dr. Evans said firmly. "Whatever it is can wait. Your baby's health comes first." As they wheeled her towards the elevator, Imani clutched her phone. Through the wide windows of the emergency room, she could see the parking lot. And there, standing beside a sleek black car that probably cost more than she made in 2 years, was a tall figure in a navy blue suit. Julian Caldwell had actually come. Her boss, the man who probably didn't even know her last name, had received her desperate message and driven through the night to help her. The elevator doors closed, but the image of him standing there, looking concerned and determined, stayed with her. What had she done? Julian Caldwell stood in the hospital parking lot, checking his phone for the 3rd time. The message had come through just as he was leaving his downtown office after another late night of quarterly reviews. At first he thought it was meant for someone else. Then he realized it was from a number in his contacts, though he couldn't immediately place who it belonged to. Someone was in trouble. Someone was scared and alone, facing the possibility of losing their baby. The raw fear in those text messages had hit him like a punch to the chest. He had left immediately. Now, standing outside City General Emergency Hospital, he felt slightly foolish. What if it really had been a wrong number? What if he was interfering in something that wasn't his business? But the messages had been so desperate, so filled with genuine terror, he couldn't just ignore them. His phone buzzed. "Room 314. They moved me upstairs. I need to explain. Room 314. So, the person was definitely here, and they were being treated. That was good. He pocketed his phone and headed toward the hospital entrance. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor gave him time to think. He was a successful businessman, used to solving problems and taking charge of difficult situations. But this felt different. This felt personal in a way that made him uncomfortable. He found room 314 and knocked gently on the doorframe. The room was dimly lit, with one bed occupied by a young woman with dark skin and worried eyes. She wore a hospital gown now, but he could see a bright red dress hanging in the small closet. It took him a moment to recognize her. "Imani," he said, stepping into the room. "Imani Jones from accounting." She nodded, looking mortified. "Mr. Caldwell, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to text you. I thought I was texting my friend. I was scared and typing fast, and I must have picked the wrong contact." "It's all right," he said gently, moving closer to her bed. "Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" The kindness in his voice seemed to surprise her. She had expected anger, maybe disappointment that an employee had bothered him with personal problems. Instead, he looked genuinely concerned. "The baby is okay," she said quietly. "The doctor says I need to stay overnight for observation." "But Mr. Caldwell, you really don't need to be here. I can handle this myself." Julian pulled the visitor chair closer to her bed and sat down. "First, call me Julian. Second, you texted asking for help. I'm here to help." "But this isn't your problem." "You work for me," he said simply. "That makes you part of my responsibility. Besides, you said you were alone. No one should have to face something like this alone." Imani studied his face, looking for signs of pity or obligation. Instead, she found genuine warmth. She had worked at Caldwell Enterprises for 2 years, but had never really interacted with Julian beyond polite greetings in the hallway. She knew he was successful, wealthy, and had a reputation for being fair but distant with employees. This was not distant. This was someone who had dropped everything to help a stranger. "I don't understand," she said. "Why would you come here? You don't even know me." "I know you work hard," Julian said. "I know you're always the first one in the office and the last one to leave. I know you helped train 3 new employees last year without being asked. I notice more than you think." A nurse entered the room carrying a water pitcher and some crackers. "How are we feeling, honey?" "Better," Imani said. "The pain has stopped." "Good. Dr. Evans will be by in the morning to check on you again. Try to get some sleep." The nurse glanced at Julian. "Visiting hours end at midnight, but family can stay if needed." After she left, an awkward silence filled the room. "I should go," Julian said, starting to stand. "Wait." Imani's voice was soft. "I need to tell you something. About the father." Julian sat back down, waiting patiently. "His name is Marcus Reed. We were together for 8 months. When I told him about the baby..." She took a deep breath. "He said he wasn't ready to be a father. He said he was too young for that kind of responsibility. He moved out the next day." "I'm sorry," Julian said, and he meant it. "I've been trying to handle everything myself. The doctor visits, the expenses, preparing for the baby. I work full-time, but it's still not enough. When the bleeding started tonight, I just felt so alone and scared." Julian was quiet for a long moment. "How far along are you?" 4 months. It's a girl." Imani's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "I found out last week." "Do you have family nearby?" "My mom lives about an hour away. She's been supportive, but she works 2 jobs and can't always be available. My dad died when I was 15. Julian processed this information. A single mother working full-time, trying to handle a pregnancy alone while dealing with medical complications. It painted a picture of someone trying very hard to stay strong while everything around her felt uncertain. "What can I do to help?" he asked. Imani looked at him in surprise. "You don't need to—" "What can I do to help?" he repeated, more firmly. She was quiet for several minutes, clearly wrestling with accepting help from her boss. Finally, she said, "The medical bills are going to be expensive. My insurance covers some of it, but not everything, and if I need bed rest, I might have to take unpaid leave from work." "Done," Julian said immediately. "Medical bills covered, and you'll receive full pay for any leave you need." "I can't accept that," Imani protested. "It's too much." "You can, and you will," Julian said gently but firmly. "This is what we do for people we care about. We help them." Tears started flowing down Imani's cheeks again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than fear. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she whispered. Julian was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. The truth was, he wasn't entirely sure himself. Something about her situation, about her quiet strength and determination, had touched something in him that he usually kept carefully guarded. "Because everyone deserves to have someone in their corner," he said finally, "and right now I'm in yours." The simple honesty of his words filled the room with a warmth that had nothing to do with the hospital heating system. For the first time in months, Imani felt like she might not have to face everything alone. Outside, the city lights twinkled through the hospital window, and for both of them, something had shifted in a way neither fully understood yet. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window as Dr. Evans entered Imani's room, clipboard in hand. Julian had stayed the entire night, dozing fitfully in the uncomfortable visitor chair. Imani had slept better than she had in weeks, feeling safe for the first time since Marcus left. "Good morning," Dr. Evans said warmly. "How are we feeling today?" "Much better," Imani replied honestly. The cramping had stopped completely, and the bleeding had reduced to almost nothing. Dr. Evans began her examination, checking Imani's vital signs and listening to the baby's heartbeat with a small device. The steady whoosh whoosh sound filled the room, strong and reassuring. "Excellent," the doctor said with a smile. "Baby sounds perfect. Your blood pressure is back to normal, and all your tests from last night came back clear." Julian sat forward in his chair. "So everything is okay?" "The immediate crisis has passed," Dr. Evans explained. "But Imani, I need you to understand that you're at risk for something called placental abruption. It's not common, but it can be serious. You need to take things very easy for the next few weeks." "What does that mean exactly?" Imani asked. "Bed rest for at least 2 weeks. No lifting anything over 10 pounds. No standing for long periods. Minimal stress." Dr. Evans looked seriously at both of them. "This is crucial for both your health and the baby's health." Julian spoke up immediately. "She'll have whatever support she needs." Dr. Evans nodded approvingly. "Good. Family support is essential in situations like this." She turned back to Imani. "I'll write you a prescription for some vitamins that will help, and I want to see you again in 1 week. Any bleeding, cramping, or unusual symptoms, you come back immediately." After the doctor left, Julian pulled his chair closer to Imani's bed. "We need to talk about the practical details." "Julian, I still can't believe you're doing this." "We've been through this," he said with a gentle smile. "Now, let's figure out what you need." Imani took a deep breath. She had spent so many months trying to handle everything alone that accepting help felt foreign and overwhelming. But looking at Julian's determined expression, she realized he wasn't going to take no for an answer. "My apartment is on the 3rd floor," she said slowly. "No elevator. If I'm supposed to be on bed rest..." "You'll need somewhere else to stay," Julian finished. "Do you have somewhere you can go?" "My mom's house, but she lives an hour away from the hospital. If something happens..." Julian was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I have a solution, but I want you to hear me out before you say no." Imani looked at him warily. "Okay. I own a small apartment building downtown, about 10 minutes from here. There's a vacant unit on the ground floor. It's furnished, has everything you need. You could stay there during your recovery." "I can't afford..." "No rent," Julian said quickly. "Consider it a company benefit. Temporary housing assistance." Imani stared at him. "That's not a real company benefit." "It is now," Julian said with a slight smile. "I own the company. I can make new benefits." Despite everything, Imani found herself smiling back. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Dead serious. You need a safe place to recover that's close to medical care. I have a safe place close to medical care. It's logical." A knock on the door interrupted them. A woman in her 50s with dark skin and worried eyes peeked in. "Imani, baby, are you okay?" The woman rushed to the bed and hugged Imani carefully. "Mom, I'm fine. The baby's fine. This is my boss, Julian Caldwell." "Julian, this is my mother, Sharon Jones." Julian stood and extended his hand. "Mrs. Jones, it's nice to meet you. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances." Sharon shook his hand while studying his face carefully. "You're the one who's been here all night?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you're the one offering to help my daughter?" "I am." Sharon Jones was not easily impressed by expensive suits or polite manners. She had raised Imani as a single mother after her husband died, working 2 jobs to keep food on the table. She could spot insincerity from a mile away. But looking at Julian Caldwell, she saw something genuine in his eyes when he looked at her daughter. "Why?" she asked bluntly. Julian considered the question carefully. "Because she needed help, and I was in a position to provide it." "That's not a complete answer," Sharon said. Julian looked at Imani, then back at her mother. "You're right. The complete answer is that your daughter is one of the hardest workers I've ever employed. She's kind, responsible, and facing a difficult situation that no one should have to face alone. I have resources that can make her life easier during a challenging time. It seems like the right thing to do." Sharon nodded slowly. "And what do you expect in return?" "Nothing," Julian said simply. "I expect nothing in return." The room was quiet for a moment as Sharon processed this. Finally, she turned to Imani. "Baby, what do you think?" Imani looked between her mother and Julian. 6 months ago, her biggest worry had been whether she could afford to upgrade her health insurance. Now she was facing single motherhood, medical complications, and financial stress that kept her awake at night. And here was her boss, a man she barely knew, offering to solve most of her immediate problems without asking for anything in return. "I think," she said slowly, "that I would be very grateful for his help." Sharon smiled for the first time since arriving. "Then I think you should accept it, with gratitude and grace." Julian felt something loosen in his chest at Sharon's approval. He hadn't realized how much it mattered to him until that moment. "There's one more thing," he said. "I'd like to cover all of your medical expenses. Prenatal care, delivery, everything. I know insurance doesn't cover everything, and I don't want you worrying about bills when you should be focusing on staying healthy." Imani's eyes filled with tears again. "Julian, that's too much. I can't possibly." "You can, and you will," Sharon said firmly. "Baby, when someone offers you a blessing, you don't argue with it. You say thank you, and you accept it with a grateful heart." Imani looked at her mother, then at Julian. "Thank you," she said softly. "I accept your help, and I'm more grateful than I can express." Julian nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the hospital's heating system. "Good," he said. "Now let's get you discharged so we can get you settled somewhere comfortable." As the discharge papers were being prepared, Julian found himself thinking about the apartment building downtown. He hadn't mentioned that he lived in the penthouse of that same building. He told himself it was just practical. Easy to check on her, make sure she had everything she needed. But deep down, he knew there was more to it than that. The apartment was nothing like Imani had expected. Julian's small ground-floor unit turned out to be a spacious 2-bedroom with hardwood floors, modern appliances, and windows that let in streams of bright, natural light. The furniture was comfortable and elegant without being pretentious, in soft blues and warm greens that made the space feel peaceful. "This is beautiful," Imani said as Julian set her small overnight bag by the door. She was wearing the bright red dress from yesterday, now clean, and she felt oddly formal in the casual space. "The kitchen is fully stocked," Julian said, walking her through the apartment. "There's a grocery service that delivers, and I've set up an account for you. Just order whatever you need." Imani stopped walking and stared at him. "Julian, you can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" "Taking care of everything. The apartment, the groceries, the medical bills. It's too much." Julian turned to face her fully. "Imani, can I ask you something?" "Okay. When Marcus left, how did that make you feel?" The question caught her off guard. "Abandoned, scared, like I wasn't worth fighting for." Julian nodded. "I understand that feeling. When I was 12, my father almost lost the family business. We went from having everything to having our house foreclosed on in the span of 6 months. I watched my parents argue about money every night. I watched my mother cry when she thought no one was looking." Imani settled carefully onto the couch, listening. "One day, my father's business partner, a man named David Chen, showed up at our door. He had restructured the debt, saved the business, and bought back our house. He handed my father the deed and said, 'Everyone deserves a second chance.' What happened? We accepted his help. My father swallowed his pride accepted every offer of assistance, and spent the next 10 years rebuilding. Not just the business, but our family's stability. Julian sat down across from her. If we had refused David's help out of pride, I would have grown up in poverty. My parents' marriage might not have survived. I might never have gotten the education that led to everything I have now. Ornam. But this is different. Is it? Julian asked gently. You're facing a challenge that's bigger than what you can handle alone. I have resources that can help. The only difference is that you work for me instead of with me. Imani was quiet for several minutes, processing his words. What if I can't pay you back? There's nothing to pay back. This isn't a loan, Imani. It's help. But why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why would you do all this for someone you barely know? Julian looked out the window at the city street below. The question had been nagging at him, too. He could give her the logical answers. She was a good employee. It was the right thing to do. He had the resources to help. But there was something deeper, something he wasn't ready to examine too closely. Because, he said, finally, sometimes life puts people in our path for a reason. Maybe you're supposed to let me help you. Maybe I'm supposed to learn something from helping you. What could you possibly learn from me? Julian smiled. I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. The simplicity of his answer somehow made it more powerful. Imani felt the last of her resistance melting away. Okay, she said. I accept your help, all of it, with gratitude. Good. Julian stood up. Now Dr. Evans said you need to rest. Is there anything you need right now? Imani looked around the beautiful apartment that was now temporarily hers, thinking about the comfortable bed waiting in the next room, the fully stocked kitchen, the peace of not having to worry about medical bills or rent. Actually, she said, I think I have everything I need. Julian smiled. I'll check on you tomorrow. Call me if anything comes up, anything at all. After he left, Imani sat in the quiet apartment for a long time. Through the windows, she could see people walking by on the sidewalk below, heading to work or lunch, or wherever their Tuesday afternoon was taking them. Normal people with normal problems. 6 months ago, she had been one of those people. Now she was pregnant, single, living in an apartment owned by her billionaire boss, and feeling more cared for than she had in years. Her phone buzzed with a text message. For a split second, her heart jumped, thinking it might be Marcus, but the name on the screen was Julian. Forgot to mention, there's a doctor's appointment scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Car service will pick you up at 1:30. Rest well. She stared at the message, then typed back, Thank you for everything. His response came quickly. You're welcome. Take care of yourself and that baby. Imani placed her hand on her stomach, where her daughter was growing safely. For the first time since she had learned she was pregnant, she felt genuinely optimistic about the future. But as she drifted off for an afternoon nap, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a question she wasn't ready to answer. What happens when this is over? Will Imani's acceptance of help change both their lives forever? What do you think will happen next? Subscribe and comment your predictions below. Julian, meanwhile, was back in his office, trying to focus on quarterly reports. But his mind kept wandering to the woman resting in the apartment below his penthouse. He had solved her immediate problems, but something told him this was just the beginning of their story, not the end. He had told her that sometimes life puts people in our path for a reason. As he looked out his office window toward the building where Imani was now safely resting, he wondered if he was about to discover what that reason might be. 1 week later, Julian knocked on Imani's apartment door, carrying a bag of fresh groceries and what had become his daily question. How are you feeling today? Much better, Imani said, opening the door with a genuine smile. She wore a comfortable blue maternity dress that Julian had sent over, along with several others in bright colors. Dr. Evans said yesterday that the baby is doing perfectly. And you? How are you doing? Imani considered the question as she watched Julian unpack groceries in the kitchen. It had become their routine. He stopped by every day after work, usually bringing something she needed or something he thought she might enjoy. Yesterday, it had been books. The day before, a selection of herbal teas that were safe during pregnancy. Honestly, she said, I feel guilty. Julian paused in unpacking a bag of fresh vegetables. About what? About all of this. She gestured around the beautiful apartment. About not working. About you taking care of everything. I've never not had a job, Julian. Since I was 16, I've always worked. You are working, Julian said. You're growing a healthy baby. That's a full-time job. It doesn't feel like work. Julian finished unpacking the groceries and turned to face her. Can I tell you something about work? Okay. For the first 5 years after college, I worked 80-hour weeks. I ate every meal at my desk. I hadn't taken a vacation day in 3 years. I thought that was what success looked like. What changed? I ended up in the hospital with exhaustion. The doctor told me that if I didn't slow down, I was going to have serious health problems before I turned 30. Julian sat down at the small dining table. That's when I learned the difference between working hard and working smart. What do you mean? Working hard means doing whatever it takes to get by. Working smart means accepting help when it's offered, so you can focus your energy on what really matters. Imani joined him at the table. And what really matters right now? Your health, the baby's health, making sure you both come through this strong and ready for whatever comes next. They were quiet for a moment, comfortable in each other's company in a way that felt natural. Over the past week, their daily conversations had evolved from polite check-ins to genuine exchanges about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Can I ask you something personal? Imani said. Of course. Have you ever been married? Had kids? Julian was quiet for several minutes. I was engaged once, 3 years ago. Her name was Rebecca. What happened? She decided she wanted someone who would put her first instead of putting work first. She wasn't wrong. Do you regret it? Julian considered the question carefully. I regret that I hurt someone who deserved better, but I don't regret that it ended. We wanted different things from life. What do you want from life? The question hung in the air between them. Julian found himself looking at Imani's face, noticing the way the afternoon light brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the way she unconsciously placed her hand on her growing belly when she was thinking. I used to think I wanted success, he said finally. Money, power, recognition. But lately I think what I really want is to matter to someone, to make a difference in a way that's about more than business. You matter to me, Imani said softly. You've made more difference in my life than I ever imagined possible. The words created a warmth between them that neither had expected. Julian felt something shift in his chest, a recognition that his feelings for Imani were becoming more complicated than simple concern for an employee. Imani, he started to say, then stopped. What? Nothing, just, I'm glad you're feeling better. But it wasn't nothing, and they both knew it. That evening, after Julian had left for a business dinner, Imani sat in the comfortable living room, thinking about their conversation. The apartment felt too quiet without his presence, which was a dangerous realization. She was developing feelings for him. Real feelings that went beyond gratitude for his help. The way he listened to her when she talked about her fears for the future. The way he remembered small details about what she liked and disliked. The way he looked at her like she was someone worth protecting. But she was also realistic about their situation. He was a billionaire CEO. She was his pregnant employee. when her medical crisis was over, when the baby was born, and she was back on her feet, what reason would he have to remain part of her life? Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed her mother's name. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, baby. How are you feeling?" "Good. Really good." Julian stopped by earlier with groceries. He's been doing that every day this week, hasn't he? Yes. Imani could hear the knowing tone in her mother's voice. "Mom, don't read anything into it. He's just being kind." "Imani Jones, I raised you to be many things, but naive wasn't one of them." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that man doesn't visit you every day out of charity. He doesn't send you beautiful dresses and fresh flowers because he's being polite to an employee." Imani looked at the small bouquet of bright yellow tulips on her kitchen counter. Julian's surprise from this morning. "Mom, even if that were true, which I'm not saying it is, this whole situation is temporary. Once I have the baby and recover, I'll go back to my regular life." "Will you?" "Of course I will." Sharon Jones was quiet for a moment. "Baby, let me ask you something. When you think about your regular life, the one you had before all this happened, does it make you happy?" Imani considered the question. Her old life, the cramped third-floor apartment, the constant worry about money, the loneliness of facing pregnancy alone, the knowledge that Marcus had abandoned her when things got difficult. "It was my life," she said finally. "That's not what I asked." Imani was quiet. "Maybe," Sharon said gently, "it's time to consider that there might be something better waiting for you. Something that includes people who choose to stay when things get difficult, instead of people who leave." After they hung up, Imani sat in the quiet apartment thinking about her mother's words. Outside, the city lights were beginning to twinkle as evening settled over downtown. Somewhere in the building above her, Julian was probably working late, as he seemed to do most nights. She wondered if he was thinking about their conversation, too. She wondered if he had felt the same shift in the air between them when she told him he mattered to her. Most of all, she wondered if she was brave enough to find out what might happen if she let herself hope for something more than just temporary help from a kind employer. The baby kicked gently, as if reminding her that some chances are worth taking. 2 weeks had passed since Imani moved into the apartment, and their daily routine had evolved into something that felt remarkably natural. Julian still stopped by every evening, but now he often stayed for dinner. They had begun cooking together, with Julian proving surprisingly skilled at simple meals, despite his claims of being hopeless in the kitchen. Tonight, Imani wore a bright green maternity dress that complemented her glowing skin. She was now at 5 months, her belly round and obvious, and she had never felt more beautiful. Part of that, she realized, was the way Julian looked at her, as if her pregnancy made her more lovely rather than less. "How was your day?" Julian asked, settling vegetables into the steamer while Imani seasoned chicken at the counter. "Productive, actually. I've been reading about childbirth classes, and I found one that starts next month. It's designed for single mothers." Julian was quiet for a moment. "Are you planning to go alone?" Yes, I assumed I would." "What if you didn't have to?" Imani turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if someone went with you, as your support person?" "Julian, you don't need to—" "I want to," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "If you're comfortable with it, I'd like to be there." The offer hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address directly. Attending childbirth classes together felt intimate in a way that went beyond employer helping employee. "You really want to learn about breathing techniques and labor positions?" Imani asked with a small smile. "I want to be helpful when the time comes. I want to know how to support you." "And after?" After the baby comes and I'm recovered and everything is back to normal? Julian set down the knife he'd been using to chop onions. Imani, can I be honest with you about something? Yes. I don't think anything about this situation is going to go back to normal. What do you mean? Julian was quiet for a long moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. I mean that getting to know you over these past few weeks has changed things for me. The way I think about work, about what matters, about what I want from life. Changed them how? Before, I worked late every night because I didn't have anything better to do. Now, I find myself watching the clock, looking forward to coming here, to talking with you about your day, hearing about the baby's kicks, arguing with you about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. Imani felt her heart speed up. Julian, I know this is complicated, he continued. I know you're in a vulnerable position, and I'm in a position of power over you. I know you're dealing with a pregnancy, and I'm not the baby's father. I know there are a dozen reasons why this doesn't make sense. But I also know that I care about you. Not just as someone who needs help, but as a person I enjoy spending time with. Someone whose opinion matters to me. Someone who makes me laugh and challenges me to think differently about things. Imani leaned against the kitchen counter, processing his words. Are you saying you have feelings for me? I'm saying I'm developing feelings for you. Real feelings that go beyond wanting to help you through a difficult time. The kitchen was quiet, except for the gentle sound of vegetables steaming. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. I have feelings for you too, Imani said quietly. Julian felt relief wash over him. You do? Yes, but I'm scared. Of what? Imani looked down at her hands. Of getting hurt again, of believing that someone cares about me and then having them leave when things get real. Julian moved closer to her, stopping just within arm's reach. Imani, look at me. She lifted her eyes to meet his. I'm here every day. I've been here through medical scares and emotional breakdowns and mundane conversations about what to have for dinner. What part of this isn't real? The part where you have choices, Imani said. Right now I need help, so you feel good about providing it. But what happens when I don't need help anymore? When I'm just a single mother with a demanding job and a crying baby, and all the complicated messiness of regular life? Julian reached out and gently took her hands in his. Then I'll be here for the messiness too, if you'll let me. You say that now. I say that now, and I'll say it tomorrow. And I'll say it 6 months from now when you're sleep-deprived and covered in baby food and wondering why you ever thought you could handle motherhood. Despite her fears, Imani found herself smiling. You have no idea what you're signing up for. Maybe not, but I'd like to find out. They stood there for a moment, hands linked, looking into each other's faces. The timer on the stove chimed, breaking the spell. Dinner's ready, Imani said softly. Right. Dinner. But neither of them moved immediately. The conversation had shifted something fundamental between them, acknowledged feelings that had been growing quietly for weeks. Julian, Imani said, yes? I'd like you to come to the childbirth classes with me. Really? Really, but I have one condition. What's that? No more walking on eggshells around each other. If we're going to do this, if we're going to see where these feelings lead, then we need to be honest about what we want. Julian squeezed her hands gently. What do you want, Imani? I want to stop being afraid of caring about you. I want to see if what we have is strong enough to build something real on. And I want to be the person you can count on, whether that's for medical emergencies or midnight ice cream runs, or just someone to talk to after a difficult day. Midnight ice cream runs? Julian grinned. I hear pregnant women have cravings at inconvenient hours. Where did you hear that? I may have been reading some books about pregnancy and childbirth. Imani stared at him. You've been reading pregnancy books? How else am I supposed to know what you're going through? The simple thoughtfulness of it brought tears to Imani's eyes. You really care about this. About me. About the baby. I really do. This time when Imani felt tears coming, they were tears of joy rather than fear. For the first time since Marcus had walked out, she felt like she might not have to face the future alone. So, Julian said, finally letting go of her hands to check on their dinner. Tell me more about these childbirth classes. As they ate dinner together, talking about breathing techniques and hospital bags and all the practical preparations for the baby's arrival, both of them felt something settling into place. This wasn't just temporary help anymore. This was the beginning of something that neither of them fully understood yet, but both were willing to explore. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and inside the small apartment, two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way began to imagine what their future might look like together. Julian's phone rang at 7:30 Saturday morning, waking him from a deep sleep in his penthouse apartment. The caller ID showed his father's name, which was unusual. Harrison Caldwell, Sr., rarely called on weekends unless something was wrong. Good morning, Dad. Julian, we need to talk. I'll be at your office in an hour. The line went dead before Julian could respond. He sat up in bed, running a hand through his hair. His father's tone had been clipped, formal, and distinctly unhappy about something. An hour later, Julian sat across from his father in his downtown office, wondering what could have prompted this early morning meeting. I hear you've been playing house with one of your employees, Harrison said without preamble. Julian felt his jaw tighten. I've been helping someone who needed help. A pregnant someone. Yes. Someone whose baby isn't yours. That's correct. Harrison leaned back in his leather chair, studying his son's face. Julian, I didn't build this company so you could throw it away on some misguided charity case. Careful, Dad, Julian said quietly. You're talking about someone I care about. That's exactly the problem. Harrison stood up and began pacing behind the desk. Do you have any idea how this looks? The CEO of Caldwell Enterprises, one of the most successful companies in the state, shacking up with a pregnant secretary. She works in accounting, not as a secretary, and we're not shacking up. She's living in your building, you're paying her bills, you're seen with her in public. How exactly is that different? Julian stood up as well, facing his father across the desk. The difference is that I care about her well-being and the well-being of her baby. The difference is that I'm helping someone who deserves help. And when this all goes wrong, when she decides to sue you for more money, or when the press gets hold of this story, what then? It won't go wrong. How can you be so naive? Harrison's voice was rising. You barely know this woman. She got herself pregnant by some man who abandoned her, and now she's latched onto you because you have money. Can't you see what's happening here? Julian felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice level. What I see is a hard-working woman who found herself in a difficult situation through no fault of her own. What I see is someone with integrity and strength who's trying to do the right thing for her child. You see what she wants you to see. No, Dad. I see what's really there because I've taken the time to get to know her. Harrison stopped pacing and fixed his son with a hard stare. I want her gone, Julian. Whatever arrangement you have with this woman ends now. That's not your decision to make. It is if you want to remain CEO of this company. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Julian stared at his father, seeing the same man who had taught him about business, about responsibility, about building something that would last. But he was also seeing someone who valued reputation over compassion, appearances over genuine human connection. You're threatening my job because I'm helping someone. I'm protecting our family's reputation and our company's future. This woman is a liability, Julian. She's a distraction that's already affecting your judgment. How is she affecting my judgment? When was the last time you worked a full day without running off to check on her? When was the last time you attended a business dinner or a networking event? You've become so focused on playing savior that you're neglecting your actual responsibilities. Julian was quiet for a moment, considering his father's words. It was true that his priorities had shifted. He had been leaving work earlier, declining some social obligations, rearranging his schedule around Imani's needs. But for the first time in his adult life, he felt like he was living rather than just existing. "You're right," he said. "Finally, my priorities have changed. I consider that a good thing." "Julian, I'm 35 years old, Dad. I've spent 15 years building this company into something successful. I've made us more money than we could spend in 3 lifetimes. I think I've earned the right to care about someone." This isn't about caring. This is about making smart choices. And I think choosing to be with someone who makes me a better person is the smartest choice I've ever made. Harrison was quiet for several minutes, clearly struggling with his son's stubborn refusal to see reason from his perspective. "I won't support this," he said finally. "I'm not asking you to. Your mother won't either. She's already talking about how embarrassing this will be at the country club." Julian almost smiled at that. His mother's primary concern about any situation was always how it would appear to her social circle. "Then I guess you and Mom will have something to talk about. Julian, you're throwing away everything we've worked for." "No, Dad. I'm finally working towards something that actually matters to me." Harrison Caldwell, Sr., had built his success by being practical, strategic, and emotionally detached from business decisions. Watching his son make what he considered a catastrophic personal choice based on feelings rather than logic was almost more than he could bear. "Fine," he said, moving towards the door. "But when this all falls apart, don't come crying to me about how you should have listened." After his father left, Julian sat alone in his office for a long time, staring out the window toward the building where Imani was probably starting her day. He had known that his family would disapprove once they learned about the relationship. He had hoped they might be more understanding. But he had also known, even before his father's ultimatum, that he would choose Imani. His phone buzzed with a text message. "Good morning. How was your early meeting? Hope your dad isn't too upset about whatever brought him out on a Saturday." Julian smiled despite everything. Imani had noticed his father's car in the parking garage and had correctly guessed the reason for the visit. He typed back, "Could be better. Can I come down? I have some things to tell you." "Of course, I'm making pancakes." As Julian rode the elevator down to Imani's floor, he realized that his father had been wrong about one thing. This wasn't going to fall apart, but it was definitely going to be complicated. When Imani opened the door, wearing a bright blue dress and a concerned expression, Julian felt the same certainty that had been growing in him for weeks. Whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together. "So," Imani said, leading him to the kitchen where pancakes were indeed cooking on the stove. "How bad was it?" "Pretty bad," Julian admitted, "but not bad enough to change anything." "Oh no. What do you mean?" Julian sat down at the small table and looked at the woman who had somehow become the center of his world in just a few weeks. "I mean that I'd rather have a complicated life with you than a simple life without you." Imani felt her heart skip a beat. "Even if it means problems with your family?" "Even if it means problems with my family." "And if they don't come around? If they never accept me?" Julian reached across the table and took her hand. "Then that will be their loss. But it won't change how I feel about you." As they sat together in the sunny kitchen, eating pancakes and talking about the challenges that lay ahead, both of them knew that their relationship had just been tested for the first time, and both of them knew that it had passed. 3 days after Julian's confrontation with his father, Imani received an unexpected visitor. She was folding baby clothes, a new batch of tiny outfits that Julian had surprised her with, when someone knocked on her door. Through the peephole, she saw a tall Hispanic man with familiar dark eyes and an uncertain expression. Marcus. Imani's heart started racing as she opened the door, leaving the chain lock engaged. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" "Imani, please, can we talk? I don't think that's a good idea." 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking for." Against her better judgment, Imani unhooked the chain and opened the door. Marcus stepped inside, looking around the apartment with obvious surprise. "Nice place," he said. "New job paying better?" "What do you want, Marcus?" He was quiet for a moment, taking in her appearance. She was 6 months pregnant now, glowing with health, wearing a beautiful maroon maternity dress. She looked better than he had ever seen her. "I heard about your hospital scare," he said. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine. The baby's fine." "Good. That's good." Marcus sat down, uninvited, on the couch. "Imani, I've been thinking a lot, about us, about what happened." "There is no us, Marcus. You made that very clear when you moved out." "I made a mistake." The words Imani had longed to hear 6 months ago now left her feeling nothing but tired. "Did you?" "Yes. I was scared, okay? The whole thing happened so fast and I wasn't ready to be a father. But I've had time to think, and I realize I want to be part of this." "Part of what?" "The baby's life, your life. I want us to try again." Imani sat down in the chair across from him, maintaining distance between them. "Where is this coming from, Marcus? 6 months ago you said you were too young for this responsibility. What's changed?" Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I've grown up. I've realized what's important. Have you? Or did you hear something else that made you suddenly interested in being involved?" "What do you mean?" Imani studied his face, seeing the same evasive expression she remembered from whenever he was hiding something. "Did someone tell you about Julian?" Marcus's expression shifted, becoming defensive. "I heard you were living with some rich guy. People are talking, Imani." "What people?" "Does it matter? The point is, I heard you found yourself a sugar daddy, and I thought you should know that I'm ready to step up now. Be the father this baby deserves." The casual cruelty of his words hit Imani like a slap. "You think I'm with Julian for his money?" "Aren't you? Come on, Imani. You're living in a fancy apartment, wearing expensive clothes. A guy like that doesn't take care of a pregnant woman out of the goodness of his heart. Get out." "Imani, listen. Get out of my apartment now." "I'm the baby's father," Marcus said, standing up. "I have rights. You gave up your rights when you walked out on us." "I can get a lawyer. I can fight for custody." Imani felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept her voice steady. "You can try. But I have documentation of you abandoning us and a lawyer who will be very interested to hear about this conversation." Marcus stared at her for a moment, clearly surprised by her strength. The Imani he remembered would have been crying by now, would have been willing to negotiate to try to make things work for the baby's sake. "You've changed," he said. "Yes, I have. I've learned what it feels like to be with someone who doesn't run away when things get difficult. This won't last, you know. Guys like him don't end up with girls like you. I think you should leave before I call security." After Marcus left, Imani sat in the quiet apartment, shaking slightly from the encounter. She was still sitting there 20 minutes later when Julian arrived for his usual evening visit. "Hey," he said, then stopped when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" Marcus was here. Julian's entire demeanor changed. What did he want? To tell me he's ready to be a father now. To tell me that you're just using me and this won't last. Imani looked up at him. To threaten to fight for custody of the baby. Julian sat down beside her on the couch. "Are you okay?" I think so. But Julian, what if he's serious about the custody thing? Then we'll deal with it. But Imani, you know he can't just show up after 6 months and demand parental rights, especially if he's been absent during the entire pregnancy. He seemed pretty confident that a court would side with him as the biological father. Julian was quiet for a moment, thinking. Would you like me to have my lawyer look into this? Imani nodded. Yes, please. Good. We'll get ahead of this. Julian paused, then asked gently, how did it feel seeing him again? Imani considered the question. Disappointing and clarifying. Clarifying how? I realized that 6 months ago, if he had come back and said he wanted to try again, I probably would have said yes. Not because I loved him, but because I was scared of being alone. And now? Now I know the difference between someone who's with you because they want to be, and someone who's with you because they think they should be. She looked directly at Julian. And I know the difference between someone who shows up when it's convenient and someone who shows up when you need them. Julian reached for her hand. Imani, I need to tell you something. Okay. After seeing Marcus today, after hearing him threaten you and the baby, I'm even more certain about how I feel. About you, about us. How do you feel about us? I love you, Julian said simply. I love you, and I want to be part of your life and your daughter's life. Not just for now, but permanently. Imani felt tears spring to her eyes. Julian! I know it's complicated. I know there are legal issues to work out with Marcus, and family issues with my parents, and practical questions about how we make this work long-term. But I also know that I want to figure it out with you. I love you too, Imani said softly. I was afraid to say it before, afraid it was too soon or too complicated. But I do. I love you. Julian leaned over and kissed her gently, a kiss that tasted like promises and hope in the future they were both brave enough to want. So, what do we do now? Imani asked when they broke apart. Now we call my lawyer about Marcus. We figure out the legal protections you need, and then we start planning for the future we want, instead of just reacting to the problems other people create. What kind of future do you want? Julian smiled. One where I get to come home to you and your daughter every day. One where we build something together that's stronger than whatever challenges come our way. Even if your family never accepts me? My family will come around eventually. But even if they don't, you and the baby are my family now too. As they sat together on the couch, talking about lawyers and custody battles and family dynamics, Imani realized that Marcus's visit had actually been a gift in disguise. It had forced her to recognize how much she had grown, how much she had healed, and how much she truly cared for the man sitting beside her. The tension is building. Will true love win? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for the emotional conclusion. For the first time since learning she was pregnant, Imani felt completely confident about the choices she was making. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was no longer facing them alone. 2 weeks later, Julian's lawyer delivered news that would change everything. Michael Torres sat across from them in his downtown office, a thick file folder open on the desk between them. I've done some investigating into Marcus Reed, he said, and what I found is very interesting. Imani, now 7 months pregnant and wearing a bright blue dress, leaned forward in her chair. Julian reached over and took her hand. What did you find? Julian asked. First, the good news. Marcus has no legal standing to demand custody or visitation rights at this point. He voluntarily abandoned his parental responsibilities. There's documentation of that abandonment, and he's made no financial contributions to the pregnancy or medical care. Imani felt relief wash over her. So he can't take the baby? Not without a very expensive legal battle that he's unlikely to win, especially given what else I discovered. What else? Julian asked. Michael opened the file folder and pulled out several documents. Marcus Reed has been asking questions about Julian for the past month, specifically questions about his net worth, his business holdings, and his family's wealth. Yes, he's been investigating Julian? Imani felt a chill run down her spine. More than that. He's been in contact with a tabloid reporter trying to sell them a story about Julian's relationship with you. Julian felt anger building in his chest. What kind of story? The headline was going to be something like, "Billionaire CEO takes advantage of desperate pregnant employee." Marcus was going to claim that you coerced Imani into a relationship in exchange for financial support. Imani stared at the lawyer in shock. He was going to lie about us to the press? It gets worse, Michael continued. Marcus's sudden interest in being a father coincides exactly with his discovery that Julian is worth several $100 million. He wasn't coming back for you or the baby, Imani. He was coming back for a potential payday. The room was quiet for several minutes as they processed this information. Can we stop him? Julian asked. Actually, he's already been stopped. When the tabloid editor called to verify the story, I was able to provide them with documentation showing Marcus's abandonment of his parental responsibilities, his complete absence during the pregnancy, and evidence of his mercenary motives. No reputable publication will touch this story now. What about Marcus himself? He received a cease and desist letter yesterday. If he continues to harass you or makes any more attempts to sell false stories about your relationship, he'll face legal consequences. Imani felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the threat was over. Sadness that the father of her child had turned out to be even worse than she had imagined. I'm sorry, Imani, Julian said gently. I know this must be painful to hear. Actually, Imani said slowly, it's not painful, it's clarifying. Again. What do you mean? I mean that now I know for certain that Marcus never loved me or wanted our baby. He saw an opportunity to make money, and that's all. She looked at Julian. It makes me appreciate even more what real love looks like. Michael cleared his throat. There's one more thing we need to discuss. Julian, your father contacted my office yesterday. Julian tensed. What did he want? He wanted me to draw up a prenuptial agreement. A what? Imani looked confused. He's assuming you two are planning to get married, Michael explained. He wants to protect the family assets. Julian felt his anger flare again. I didn't ask him to do that. Actually, Michael continued, I think his timing is interesting because I was going to suggest that you two should think about making your relationship official before the baby arrives. What do you mean? Imani asked. I mean that if you're married, Julian would have legal standing as the baby's stepfather immediately. It would provide additional protection against any future claims from Marcus, and it would establish Julian's parental rights from birth. Julian and Imani looked at each other, both recognizing the practical wisdom of the suggestion. But, Michael continued, if you do decide to marry, you should know that Julian's father is going to push hard for a prenup that would leave you with almost nothing if the marriage doesn't work out. That's not happening, Julian said immediately. The prenup or the marriage? Imani asked quietly. The prenup. If we get married as equals. No contracts that assume failure. Imani was quiet for several minutes, thinking. Julian, maybe your father has a point. What? I mean, from his perspective, I can see why he'd be concerned. We haven't been together very long. I am pregnant with another man's child. And you are wealthy enough that people might question my motives. I don't question your motives. I know you don't. But maybe a prenup would actually protect both of us. It would prove that I'm not with you for your money, and it would give your family one less thing to worry about. Julian stared at her. You would sign a prenup if it meant my family would give us a chance? Yes. Michael leaned back in his chair, clearly impressed. That's actually very smart. It would remove the financial element from everyone's concerns about your relationship. But I don't want you to have to prove anything to anyone, Julian protested. I'm not doing it to prove anything, Imani said. I'm doing it because I love you, and I want your family to see that I love you for who you are, not what you have. Julian was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Imani's offer. The fact that she was willing to sign a prenup actually proved to him more than anything else that her feelings for him were genuine. Okay, he said finally. If that's what you want to do, then we'll do it. Really? Really? But Imani, I want you to know that I'm not asking you to marry me just for legal protection. Why are you asking me to marry you? Julian turned in his chair to face her fully. I'm asking you to marry me because I love you, because I want to build a life with you and raise your daughter as our daughter, because I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night for the rest of our lives. Tears started flowing down Imani's cheeks. Are you proposing to me in a lawyer's office? I'm proposing to you wherever you'll say yes. Yes, Imani said through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Michael Torres had witnessed many emotional moments in his law practice, but watching a billionaire CEO propose to his pregnant employee in the middle of a discussion about custody battles and prenuptial agreements was definitely a first. Congratulations, he said with a smile. Now, shall we discuss the timeline for making all of this legal before the baby arrives? As they spent the next hour working out the practical details of their engagement, both Julian and Imani felt a sense of everything falling into place. They had faced the truth about Marcus's motives, addressed the concerns about Julian's family, and committed to a future together based on love rather than convenience or necessity. The baby kicked energetically, as if celebrating the decision. And for the first time since this whole journey began, Imani felt completely at peace with the path her life was taking. 2 months later, on a bright October morning, Imani woke up at 4 a.m. with contractions that were impossible to ignore. She was 2 days past her due date, and Dr. Johnson had warned her that the baby could arrive at any time. Julian, she said softly, shaking his shoulder. They had been married for 6 weeks in a simple ceremony at the courthouse with Sharon Jones and Michael Torres as witnesses. Julian had moved into the apartment with her, preferring the cozy space to his sterile penthouse. What's wrong? Julian was instantly awake, alert. I think it's time. Julian sat up immediately, switching into the calm, focused mode they had practiced in childbirth class. How far apart are the contractions? About 5 minutes. Okay, let's get you to the hospital. The ride to City General Hospital felt both endless and too fast. Imani was wearing the comfortable green dress Julian had bought her specifically for the hospital trip, and she gripped his hand tightly as each contraction passed. You're doing great, Julian murmured, stroking her hair as they sat in the back seat of the car he had called. Just breathe through it. At the hospital, Dr. Evans was waiting for them. Let's see how we're progressing, she said with a warm smile after they got Imani settled in the labor and delivery room. The next 8 hours passed in a blur of contractions, breathing exercises, and Julian being exactly the support person Imani needed. He held her hand, brought her ice chips, and reminded her of the breathing techniques they had learned in class. I can't do this, Imani gasped during a particularly intense contraction. Yes, you can, Julian said firmly. You're the strongest person I know. You can do anything. But at hour 9, something changed. Dr. Evans's expression became serious as she checked the fetal monitor. What's wrong? Julian asked immediately. The baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to do an emergency C-section. Imani felt panic rising in her chest. Is she okay? We're going to make sure she's okay, Dr. Evans said, already moving to prepare for surgery. Julian, as Imani's husband and the baby's legal father, I need you to make some quick decisions about her care. The words hit both of them simultaneously. Legal father. The marriage and adoption papers had gone through just 2 weeks earlier. Legally, Julian was this baby's father in every way that mattered. "What do you need to know?" Julian asked, his hand never leaving Imani's. "If we run into complications, who do we prioritize? Mother or baby?" It was the question Julian had hoped never to face. He looked at Imani, seeing the fear in her eyes, mixed with trust that he would make the right choice. "Save them both," he said. "Julian," Dr. Evans said gently, "I need a clear directive." Julian looked at Imani again, then back at the doctor. "Save Imani. If you can only save one of them, save Imani." "Julian, no." Imani started to protest. "Yes," he said firmly. "I love you both, but I can't live without you." 20 minutes later, in the operating room, Dr. Evans worked quickly, while Julian held Imani's hand and whispered words of encouragement in her ear. The surgery felt like it lasted forever, and like it was over in an instant. Then, suddenly, there was crying. "She's here," Dr. Evans announced, holding up a small, red-faced baby girl with a powerful set of lungs. "Is she okay?" Imani asked weakly. "She's perfect," Dr. Evans said with a huge smile. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and clearly very angry about being evicted. Julian found himself crying as he looked at the tiny person who was now officially his daughter. She had Imani's dark eyes and a head full of curly hair, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Do you want to hold her?" the nurse asked Julian. With shaking hands, he took his daughter for the first time. She stopped crying immediately and looked up at him with curious, dark eyes. "Hi there," he whispered. "I'm your daddy." Imani, still recovering from the surgery but fully awake, watched Julian hold their daughter with tears streaming down her face. The sight of this man she loved cradling the baby they would raise together was more beautiful than anything she had ever imagined. "What's her name?" the nurse asked, preparing to fill out the birth certificate. Julian and Imani had discussed names for weeks, but looking at their daughter now, they both knew there was only one choice. "Faith," Imani said softly. "Her name is Faith." "Faith Caldwell," Julian added, and the name felt perfect. 3 days later, they brought Faith to the apartment that was now officially their first family home. Julian had taken 2 weeks off from work, despite his father's protests, to help Imani recover and to bond with their daughter. "I can't believe she's ours," Imani said, sitting in the comfortable chair by the window, nursing Faith, while Julian sat nearby, watching them both with an expression of complete contentment. "I can't believe how much I love her already," Julian said. "Is it normal to feel like your heart might explode from happiness?" "If it's not normal, then we're both abnormal," Imani said with a laugh. That evening, as they settled Faith into her crib for the night, Julian put his arms around Imani and looked at the family they had created. "Do you remember when you accidentally texted me that night at the hospital?" he asked. "The worst mistake I ever made that turned out to be the best mistake I ever made." "Exactly. Do you think you would have ever talked to me otherwise? Really talked to me? Not just polite workplace conversation?" Imani considered the question. "Probably not. I thought you were too important to notice someone like me. And I thought I was too busy building a business empire to notice that I was missing out on everything that actually mattered." "And now?" Julian looked at their sleeping daughter, then at the woman who had become his whole world. "Now I know that the most important things in life aren't things you build. They're things you find when you're brave enough to let someone else matter more than your plans." 6 months later, Julian's parents finally came to visit. Sharon Jones was there too, and the apartment was filled with the sounds of 3 grandparents competing for baby Faith's attention. Harrison Caldwell, Sr., sat in the living room holding his granddaughter while she gurgled happily at him. "She's beautiful," he said to Imani, and she could hear genuine warmth in his voice for the first time. "She is, isn't she?" "Imani," Harrison said quietly, while the others were in the kitchen preparing dinner. "I owe you an apology." "You don't?" "I do. I was wrong about you. About your motives. About what you meant to Julian. I can see now that you make my son happy in a way I've never seen before." "Thank you," Imani said simply. "And I can see that you love this baby the way every child deserves to be loved. We both do." "Julian told me about the prenup situation, about your willingness to sign one to prove your intentions." "Yes. We're tearing it up. Your family now, all of it. The business, the money, all of it belongs to all of us." Imani felt tears spring to her eyes. "Harrison, you don't have to." "Yes, I do, because that's what families do. They share everything, including trust." That night, after everyone had gone home and Faith was sleeping peacefully in her crib, Julian and Imani sat together on their couch, talking about the day. "I never imagined my life could be this good," Imani said, curled up against Julian's side. "Even with all the complications? The drama with Marcus, the issues with my family, the emergency surgery?" "Especially with all the complications," Imani said. "Because every challenge we faced together. And every time we chose each other." Julian kissed the top of her head. "I love our life. Even though it's not what you planned. It's better than what I planned. It's everything I didn't know I wanted." As they sat together in their small apartment, listening to their daughter's soft breathing from the next room, both Imani and Julian reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A mistaken text message had led to a hospital emergency, which had led to an offer of help, which had led to friendship, which had led to love, which had led to marriage and family, and a happiness neither had imagined possible. "Do you think Faith will ask about her biological father someday?" Imani asked. "Probably. And when she does, we'll tell her the truth. That Marcus helped create her, but that he chose not to be part of her life. And that sometimes the people who choose to love us matter more than the people who are obligated to love us. And we'll tell her that families are made of love, not just biology." "Exactly." Faith stirred in her sleep, making the soft sounds that meant she would wake up soon for her late-night feeding. Julian got up to check on her, and Imani watched him lean over the crib, adjusting the tiny blanket and whispering words of love to their daughter. This was their life now. Midnight feedings and early morning giggles and the extraordinary joy of watching someone you love discover the world for the first time. It was messier and more complicated and more wonderful than anything either of them had ever planned. And as Imani joined Julian by the crib, watching Faith sleep with the absolute peace that comes from knowing you are completely loved, she realized that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. Sometimes a desperate text message sent to the wrong number can change everything. Sometimes accepting help from an unexpected source can lead to love. And sometimes, when you're brave enough to let kindness and faith lead the way, you find that the family you build is even stronger than the family you're born into. Faith opened her eyes and looked up at her parents. And in that moment, all three of them knew that their story was just beginning.